Hey, welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast. You are watching the 2020 Servant Leader Series, and we are so honored that you're here. We appreciate you taking the time just to be a part of this. In studio today, I have a gentleman that I've known, I guess, about almost 10 years now. Todd and I met when he was the pastor of the men's ministry at Gateway Church, which is my home church. And we've had several conversations just in the lobby and had lunch together and just hung out together. And, you know, watching what he's done in the men's ministry, but understanding that while Gateway does things a certain way and men's ministry is done a different way around the world by everybody, Todd has probably spent as much time as anybody studying the psychology of men and asking the question, what is it beyond the church, beyond the ministry, what is it that makes men tick? And what is it that's going to make them genuinely successful? And so from university to traveling and speaking in high schools to actually training people to travel and speak in high schools and build character around the world, into ministry. Todd now has 30 years of experience in leading and in teaching and in helping men to find who they are and who they're supposed to be. So please help me welcome Todd McIntyre.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
So the five spokes, if we will, just as a quick recap, for what I call the balance of leadership, that balance wheel of leadership. It starts with authority and then moves to respect, next to influence, finally to impact and transformation.
Yeah.
And I find that that's not just a representation of a circle or stages, but it's cyclical. And when you find that you have transformation taking place both in your own life and in other people's lives, you find a new level of authority, and so there's more authority and more respect and more influence and more impact and transfer, and it just keeps going. But in transformation, we also find it's like a braided rope with story. Very few people have seen transformation in their life until their own internal story changes. But when that story changes, transformation is inevitable.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say I've watched you in almost 10 years that we've known each other employ all of those areas, authority and respect and influence and impact, and to see transformation in the lives of men. But I know you're moving on to new things. Right now you've got new ideas, you've got a new book coming out. So that's really what I want to talk about. What led you to write what you're writing? What are some of the goals that you hope to accomplish in the writing of the book, and what's next for you on your journey?
Yeah, I think it's a great, just going back to the will, I think the will is incredible. And I think for most of us, we think leadership is about knowing how to do all the right things and then training people to do that. But it's really about being the right person before you can train the right people.
Wow.
Because if you know your stuff, but your character's not healthy, people aren't going to follow you. Doesn't matter how much you know.
And if they do follow you, it's a bad plan.
It's a bad plan. And so I love what Henry Cloud said. He said, leadership is about getting people from where they are to where you want them to go. And you better have a vision. And a lot of people call it mission. I call it strategy. You better have a vision and a strategy as to where you're going to get them. Because if you don't, you're just spinning your wheels. And I really think the influence that you have comes because you're a person that's worth following, not just a person who knows stuff.
Right.
So I think that's really cool you're doing this.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking a little bit before we got started about the idea of men, especially, not knowing what the scoreboard is.
Yeah.
Tell me a little more about that. I mean, I have my own philosophies on it, but I'd like to hear what you're thinking on that.
Yeah. So, the book I'm writing on is really about masculinity, and it's a hot topic right now in society because most men, we can easily say, and it's not an understatement, that we've lost our masculinity. That a lot of us are what we call emasculated, which if I ask most men, what does it mean to be masculated and what does it mean to be emasculated? Most of them couldn't give you the right answer. Most of them wouldn't know what the answer is. They might say something like a masculine man is a tough guy, or a guy who drives the right car, or has money, or is successful, or maybe has a good girl or a lot of girls. But the reality is masculinity has nothing to do with any of those things, but we're stuck in that. And then if I ask them what emasculation is, many of them will say it's just about being a girl. And it's not about being a girl. And it has nothing to do with about being a girl. It has nothing to do with being feminine versus masculine. But emasculation is when you don't have the power that God's given you in your life to be the man He's called you to be. So the book really is a book on what does that look like? And how do we go through that process? And I actually used, for me, it's a leadership topic.
Yeah, I would agree.
Everything in a man's life to me is about leadership. And a masculine, one of the most probably I don't know how to say this, the hottest topic or the most important aspect of masculinity is how can a man lead? So what is he leading? How is he leading? And so what's interesting is Dr. Henry Cloud, who is Pastor Robert, which is our pastor at Gateway. It's his psychologist and the guy he goes to for counseling. He would come to the staff fairly often and give us leadership talks. And the first leadership talk he ever gave was really the basics of leadership. That a leader's basic idea is taking someone, a follower, from where he is to where he's supposed to be, from here to there. And so he had this whole talk one day he did, which really illuminated what we're trying to do with men, is how do we get men from being emasculated men to masculine men? What does that look like? And what is the process? And so he gave 5 steps, if you will, for leadership, which it's phenomenal. You can use this if you want. I've been using it all over. But the first step is you got to know the desired outcome. You got to know where you want to go.
Begin with the end in mind.
Begin with the end in mind. Or vision. A lot of people call it vision. I like that he called it desired outcome because it's a different way to say it. And most people hear the word vision and we have a certain connotation about it.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you're here and you're trying to get here, there's a roadmap to get there. And we just have to know we got to get our people to this place. That's the desired outcome. Here's where we are. Here's where we want to go. He said the second step is you've got to have the right personnel. If you have the wrong personnel on your team, the trip there is going to be difficult because people are going to argue, get frustrated. Dealing with men and dealing with masculinity, there's only one personnel on the team, and that's you. You're the personnel. And so if I'm talking about masculinity, I want to get a guy from a guy who's emasculated to masculated. The personnel I'm using is going to be him, and I got to talk to him about what is he doing in his own private life to get himself prepared to take this journey. And we call it, in sports terms, practice.
Right.
I think it's funny, Allen Iverson, I don't know if you remember that interview with Allen Iverson about making fun of practice. Practice, it's just practice. Practice is everything. And Allen Iverson knows well, he practiced since he was about 5 years old in basketball. And it was him carrying that ball everywhere he went, playing every chance he got that got him to the NBA.
Right.
The reality is, if we're going from here to here, if we're going from an emasculated man to a masculated man, what are the practices we need to be doing to get us there?
The daily disciplines.
The daily disciplines. And those are things a lot of men will falter right there. In fact, I tell guys, if you're not willing to create some daily disciplines in your life, you're never going to become the masculine man God's called you to be.
Well, and just to lay another sports analogy on that, I watch MMA, UFC, and other versions of it. But one of the things that fascinates me is when you listen to an experienced fighter commentating as opposed to just a ring guy.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell the difference because you'll hear him say, well, notice how he's putting the power on that front foot, or notice that inside leg kick, it's really going to take away the power of his plant. And if you don't have the observation to know what that means, if you don't have the skill set to know what that means, you're thinking, well, he's just kicking him in the leg. He's just it's going to hurt if he kicks him in the leg, but what does it matter until you realize the power of your punch starts in that big toe.
Mm.
And if you can't plant that big toe, your punch has no power.
Yeah.
So now you're just throwing wet wash rags at somebody. What is the point of that?
Mm.
You can't defend yourself because you can't get out of the way and you can't fight, but you don't realize that necessity of building the muscle on the inside of your lead leg, because if you don't build that hip flexor, for an example, or that abductor, you're not going to be able to get the foot out of the way fast enough.
That's right.
Now you're going to lose your wheels. And when you lose your wheels, you lose the fight. But the daily practice of saying, okay, what are the minutiae that I have to focus on if I want to win the fight? Because most guys go, I just want the belt. Well, how are you going to get the belt? You have to do 9,000 crunches a month.
Right.
What? 9,000? Who wants to do 9,000 crunches? How many is that a day? How many is that an hour? How do I have to break that down?
Yeah.
But that's really what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Is what are the little bitty things that you do every minute of the day, or prevent yourself from doing every minute of the day, to allow you to reach the place where you can grab the belt?
Yeah, you know what's interesting when I talk about going from here to there, from emasculated to masculated, that's God's design for men. God loves men. He wants them to be strong and powerful. I think about what Paul told Timothy. He said, God didn't give you a spirit of fear, but he gave you power, love, and a sound mind. And your power is something God gave you. Most men don't have their power anymore. And it takes what I call spiritual
They don't
fitness.
even know what makes it.
They don't. And I call it spiritual fitness. You have to get the personnel that you're working with. For me, it's men. How do I get the men getting spiritually fit to understand what it's going to take to get to where they're going to go? But the third part of this going from here to there, so the first part's knowing your desired outcome, the second part's having the right personality, the third part is strategy. And strategy is key. If you don't have the right strategy, if you don't have the right roadmap, you're going to get lost.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people, this is where we falter. We might be doing well at understanding we want to be masculine, strong, powerful men. We might even be doing spiritual practices daily, reading our Bible, praying, fasting, whatever it is that you do daily to get close to God and go to church, but we don't know the strategy, and so we're just kind of sitting in our car waiting for it to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Or you're driving right and should be going left, which is it's a big problem, because now you're lost and your wife's mad at you and your kids are yelling and we want to get to Disneyland and you guys going the wrong way. Strategy is important. And so this was probably the biggest revelation that God gave me about 5 years ago. And really, how do you develop a masculine man? So I was literally, my wife and I, we've gone through 10 years of marriage counseling. I call it marriage coaching because it sounds cooler. I've had a coach that looked into my life, and I met with weekly, and he would share with me things that I could do better with my wife, and trying to help me become the man God called me to be, really getting me spiritually fit in my marriage, to help me become a strong husband. And it was during that time that he gave us some homework assignments, and 2 homework assignments that really impacted me was, 1, give her permission to speak into your life anything she sees that's un-Christ-like. Now, when I say that to most guys, it's kind of like, are you kidding me? I'm never doing that. We're going to be talking all day.
I shouldn't even have passwords in my phone.
Yeah. But the reality is, nobody knows you better than your wife.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that God called your wife your helper. And for most guys, they don't even know what that means, but it really is to help you become more Christ-like. It's not to help you be a greater man.
Yeah.
It's not to help you be more selfish. It's to help you become more like Jesus. And if that's the case, who better than your wife can tell you what are some things in your life that you're struggling with? So the rules were, she can tell you whatever she sees that's un-Christ-like. The second part of the homework assignment was you had to do it every day. So every day you have to spend some time, 30 minutes minimum, asking her how her heart is, and is there anything she sees in my life that she would like to see changed. And you're not allowed to defend. You're not allowed to deflect. You're not allowed to argue. You're not allowed to say, well, this is the reason. You just have to listen. And then you go away and process with God what you hear. And so we do this every day. And we were doing this one day on a Saturday morning. And my wife said, I have something I want to share with you, but you're not going to like it. So for me, I kind of have to brace myself. And in my mind, pray, God help me, give me grace so I don't get upset or frustrated or deflect or defend. And she goes, sometimes you act like a boy. And of course, my heart rate went up and my blood pressure went up. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Unpack that. And everything in me was just kind of frustrated, because my first line of defense when my wife gets mad at me is to tell her all the things she's done wrong. So I'm bad, but you're bad too.
Yeah.
And so the comparison makes me feel better about my badness, I guess. But anyways,
competitiveness.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, we're in this conversation. She's unpacking it, that there's times that I pout, there's times that I get angry, there's times that I just act like a little boy when things aren't going well for me. But to be honest with you, I didn't really understand what she was saying. And so I just kind of finished the conversation. I didn't defend, deflect. I didn't say anything. I just kind of bit my tongue. And as I'm walking out of the room that day, I just, in my mind, I said, God, I don't understand what she's saying. I need help. And he quickly brought to my mind that verse where Paul says, when I was a child, I spoke in reason as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And I remembered that. And I felt like he said, look it up. I didn't even know where it was. Like, I had no idea where in the Bible that was. So I type in on my Google, on my YouVersion app on my phone, and just type in a few things, and sure enough, it comes up. And of all the chapters it comes up in 1 Corinthians 13. Which if you
the love chapter.
The love chapter. Which if you've been in church at all, you know it's called the love chapter. And it really is the chapter on love. And what's interesting, if you read the whole chapter from 1, I think it's 14 verses. If you read all 13 verses, you realize from the beginning to the end, it's all about love. But then they got this one verse in the middle, and it's verse 11, And it's Paul saying, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. And then I felt like God said, read it in context. So I just read the whole chapter. And you get to verse 4, and verse 4 is all about what love is. And it literally defines love. And so I just read that a few times, and it says, love is patient and kind. It's not jealous or boastful or proud. It's not rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. It says love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. So when I read that, I felt like God said, the context that Paul's talking about is if you're not doing this, you're still being a child. So I'm like, okay, I get that. He goes, no, I want you to read it again, but this time I want you to put a man is. So because the whole chapter is on love, and because Paul has this masculine statement right in the middle of it, I didn't feel like it was a far stretch. So I did it again, and I went through it, and I said, a man is patient. A man is kind. A man is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Does not demand his own way. Is not irritable. Keeps no record of being wronged. Does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. A man never gives up. Never loses faith. Is always hopeful. Endures through every circumstance. And then he said, and I'm thinking at that point I'm done. And then I felt like he said, I want you to read it again. But this time I want you to read it the opposite way. A boy isn't. And this is when it really hit me. Like it hit me in my gut. And he said, a boy isn't patient. And I started thinking about all the times in my life where I'm not patient. And then he says, a boy isn't kind. A boy's jealous, boastful, and proud. I thought about all the times that I talk about how good I am, or tell people I'm this or that, and I pride myself in my pride. A boy is rude. A boy demands his own way. I don't know how many times I come in and say, I want the TV remote, or it's my turn, or just get out of here, be quiet, I'm trying to do my own thing. Demand his own. That's what a boy does. It says a boy is irritable. How many times am I driving and I'm irritable with the traffic? Think about that. Road rage, yeah. That's what a boy does. A boy keeps records of being wronged. A boy does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. I know many times when people I don't like get good things happen to them, I don't like it.
Right.
And that's what a boy does. A boy gives up. A boy loses faith. A boy isn't hopeful. There's been a lot of times in our fights where I want to give up and I lose faith in what's going on, or I don't have hope in my marriage or hope in life. A boy will not endure through every circumstance. And as I started reading that, I started realizing that I'm struggling with boyhood. And I saw for the first time in my life that there's a difference between a man and a boy, but it has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with what he has or doesn't have, or his job. It has everything to do with, does he know how to love? And then if you think about Jesus, the ultimate man, there's no greater love than a man lay down his life for another. And all of a sudden, this new revelation hit me. Masculinity has nothing to do with whether or not you drive a big truck. It has everything to do with whether or not you know how to love. And I can look at this, as you were talking about scoreboards, I can look at this and this really becomes my scoreboard. I can tell you if I'm winning. I can tell you if I'm losing. I can tell you what the score is based on how I acted today. Did I love? Did I not love? Was I patient? Was I kind? Was I rude? Was I jealous? It's down to the minutiae. It's down to the specifics. It's down to the little things. But the interesting part is you can never get to that place in life unless you're willing to spend time with God and getting spiritually fit. So Henry Cloud, going back to Henry Cloud, you got to know your desired outcome. You got to know the right personnel. You got to know the strategy. He said the fourth thing for any leader is you got to know the score. If you don't know the score, you don't know if you're winning or losing.
Can't manage what you don't measure.
Can't manage what you don't measure. And so you can measure real easy, am I doing well as a man? And then the fifth thing is very simple, make the adjustments. The thing I like about, we're talking about sports, the thing I like about sports is, in any sport, whether it's soccer, football, American football, or the world's football, which is soccer, at halftime, most of the time, we're making adjustments if we're losing.
Right.
We don't normally make adjustments when we're winning. Like usually if you're winning, you're feeling like
Whatever you're doing is working.
it's
Stay
working,
at it.
just keep going.
Don't mess with what's not broke.
Just keep pressing in. And as I've spoken this message really all across the country to men, when I get to this point about evaluate yourself, what's your score? Where are you at in your life? And if you need prayer in any one of these areas, I'm more than happy to pray for you. There's not a guy who doesn't raise his hand. There's not a man who isn't struggling in some area of their masculinity and recognizing that, man, I haven't loved the way I should love. And then if you think about this, you take it even further, because this, as I'm writing this book, I'm just going deeper and deeper. But imagine if men really knew how to love. What would our world be like today? Imagine if masculinity in our mind really was love, and it wasn't the big car, the girls, and all the money and stuff. Imagine if it really was that. What impact would you make on your family? What impact would your family make on the world? What impact would you make at your job? What impact, because you love those around you, would they want to work for you and be a part of you? And the reality is this: it's harder to be a man that loves than a man who thinks masculinity is the car, the job, the money. Because anybody can do those things, but to sit down and love someone that doesn't love you or isn't treating you the way you want to be treated, it takes a man.
Well, and one of the things when I first started working on this balance wheel concept, early on, I wanted to bring power back to leadership. So a lot of people feel like they're in a leadership role, maybe the manager at such and such, or the shift supervisor, slinging fries or whatever, but they don't have any power.
Mm-hmm.
And people genuinely feel powerless today, whether it's the political climate, the financial climate, or the spiritual climate that they find themselves in, their emotional position in their relationship, or the familial relationships that they have, or their significant other. And that lack of power often results in, I don't have any control, I don't get to make any decisions, I'm completely lost. To put together what you're saying with what I'm saying, I kind of abandoned the idea of calling it power because there's such a misnomer for power.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, they can't distinguish leadership from management. When I say I train on leadership, they look at me kind of like, yeah, we already know that. We figured all that out. And I think, it's ironic that still millions of books are sold every year on leadership because we haven't figured it all out. There's still a lot more to know.
Yeah.
But you quoted a verse that was a revelation to me in my 20s, before I was married, before I had kids. And when it was revealed to me the way it was, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And that was, no greater love has a man than this, that he would lay down his life for a friend. I was a soldier at the time of that. I was a firefighter in the Air Force. And I realized every time that the tones went off, we got in the truck, we were literally putting our lives on the line. I mean, most people run out of a burning building, we were running in it.
Mm-hmm.
We were doing that to protect lives and property. That was our job. But I was also a soldier, and we were on the front lines of Desert Storm. And so I realized at any minute we could be taken out. Is that what it means to love somebody? And the revelation was no, it's not. It's harder than that.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder than being willing to put your life on the line. I'm like, okay, so if laying down your life for a friend doesn't mean dying, what does it mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was, it means selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
It means I'm going to give up having my way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do something that seems completely disinterested in my own self-interest. And so a model of that happened. A young lady walked into a convenience store I was working in after I got out of the Air Force, and the two guys that she was with, it was just two guys that were probably 4 or 5 years her senior.
Mm-hmm.
She was probably 14, 15 years old. They both come in and go back to the restroom. She's standing at the counter and she looks at me and she goes, I've never had sex before, but I really like one of these guys. And he said he'll only be with me if I'm with the other one first. And I'm like, wow. I mean, that's devastating. That's not love.
Mm-hmm.
But my next phone call was to a friend of mine that I was hanging out with at the time. It was 2:40 in the morning. And I thought, what are the odds she'll even answer the phone? It was before the days of cell phones, so I'm waking up the whole house, and I know it. But I called the house anyway, and I told her the scenario, and she got out of bed and drove 40 minutes to that Easy Mart to have a conversation with that girl. And I said, that is laying down your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's laying down your interests. It's laying down your own concerns. It's laying down your own thoughts, your own ideas, what's important to me right now. I'm going to set it all aside out of love. Mm-hmm. And it may not be someone that you're affectionate about. It may not even be somebody that you're in a relationship with. but loving them enough to say what's important to me doesn't matter right now. That's a different kind of love.
Yeah.
But there's a power that goes in that, because I go back to my
Absolutely.
circle. You gain authority by giving it away. You gain authority by being under it. You gain respect the same way by giving it away and being under it. And that's where influence comes from. So when you're willing to respect an absolute stranger in a way that you would say, what's important to me right now is not important to me right now, what's important is you. That's that authority and that respect, both surrendered and given away, which builds the right for you to have an influence in their life. It sounds to me like what you're talking about, true masculinity, is that level of love that says, whatever was important to me, it's not anymore. What's important to me right now is you.
Yeah.
Whether you're an absolute stranger or you're my spouse or my child.
Yeah.
Your being is more important to me than my own happiness, comfort, success, achievement, accomplishment, whatever else.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting in the church world, and there's a ton of stats, and there's people who quote different things. So I'm just going to quote what I've heard, but I've heard that there's a lot of people that are getting divorced in churches, and I think all of us could say the number's high. I don't know if it's 50% or 25% or 40%, and depending on what church you're in, people say it's different. But that divorce is rampant in the church, not just in the world, is a phenomenal thought, because you would think that if anybody who understands love, it would be the church.
Should be.
But the reality is we grew up, and I grew up as a Christian. I grew up in a church home. I grew up as in a faith-based home, and we talked about God all the time. But I didn't know that when I got married, it was about the other person. What I thought was that it was about me. That I'm trying to find someone. I'm almost interviewing someone for a job. Do you fit my criteria? Are you pretty enough? Are you sexy enough? Are you funny enough? Are you whatever enough?
Right.
So that I could have you, and we could go do something. And it's such a cruddy way of living life, because the reality is, I'm not interviewing her, she's interviewing me. Am I selfless enough to love you and not get what I want, but still love you anyways? And it's not something you hear even in the church. Even in the church, we don't hear that laying down your life literally could mean, I really want to have sex tonight, and I don't want to have sex tonight, and I lay it down and say, okay, we're not going to because you don't want to. Or I want to go do this, and you don't want to do this, and so I'm going to lay it down. Instead, we might fight or argue, and because we didn't get our way, all of a sudden, they don't care about us. Now that they don't care about us, why should we stay married? And you see this throughout the church. We all know divorce is wrong. I don't think there's any faith-based person that would say divorce is okay. Nobody goes into marriage thinking we're going to get divorced. But it's amazing to me how often we'll give up what we believe for what we want.
I came into my marriage, it was her second, my first. I came in with at the time, 10-year addiction to pornography. By the time it was over, 15 years at that point. By the time it was over, I had spent 25 years addicted. But the first 10 years of our marriage, I really put her through hell. And demands that were unrealistic, inhumane, just expectations that, look, they're doing it in the videos. What's wrong with you? The way she describes it in her book, The 5 Bound Positions of a Happy Wife, she talks about being a helper and an armor bearer. And she said, there was a time that I just had to draw boundaries. And the first time I heard her say that was a little church in Atlanta. And she said, I had to build boundaries to save our marriage. And I'm like, hang on, what do you mean by boundaries? And she said, well, there were times that I just said, I'm not going to let you talk to me that way. And there were limitations that I set. And so the more we discussed that, even in front of the crowd, I was like, okay, so here's the way I see those boundaries, because this is what I did see in our marriage. And it goes right back to your point. There were a lot of guys that get caught up in that addiction and in adultery, and their minds are jacked up that way. And the first sign of it, she's gone. She's done. She's out. Divorce is the solution, and for all good practical purposes, right? And she said, I'm just going to draw these boundaries instead of building walls that end our marriage. And what that looked like to me was I would come to the bedroom with all these notions of selfishness in my mind. I want this, I want it like this, I want it this way, and I want it now. And it'd be like walking in with the cheesecake menu, and Cheesecake Factory menu in my mind, 32 pages, it's all gourmet, it's all top notch, I want all of it. And the boundaries that she built was much more like, you've come to Babe's Chicken, where we sell chicken. That's what's on the menu. It's meat. You can have all of this you want. You're not getting anything else.
Yeah.
It's like this and this only. And I do believe that saved our marriage. And probably, honestly, saved my life. Because I was on a very destructive path. I grew up the only son of a single mom. Was molested at 9 years old. I had no idea what masculinity looked like. I knew what power looked like by dominating tyrannical authority. I knew what it meant to lead by force, to make someone submit, to manipulate them or cajole them or physically force them to do what I wanted done. The rest of it was beyond me.
Yeah. My first marriage coach was a Jewish scholar. He was in Arizona, and he was a guy that just kind of took Debbie and I under his wing for 2.5 years. We'd go to his house, and he would teach us concepts. And he taught us the concept of leadership one day, and he talked about the levels of leadership that are influential and the levels that aren't as influential, but they all are levels of leadership. And he said the lowest level of leadership that anyone can give is force of control, which force control says, here's a gun, do what I say, and because I'm holding a gun to you, you're going to do what I say because you don't want to die or get hurt. It's a level of influence. It's just a poor level of influence. It's what the mafia would use. But there's times with kids that you have to use this level of influence. So when they're really, really little, if they're about to cross the street and you see a car coming, you don't have time to explain to them and give them vision and hope of why they shouldn't cross the street. You scream and yell and do whatever you can. You might even tackle them, control them from crossing the street because you want to protect their lives. So it's not wrong always to use force and control. It's just wrong in the wrong context.
Right.
He said the next level is bribery or incentives. It's where if you do this, you get this. Most businesses are run this way, which is why a lot of times people can't hold on to their employees, no matter how much they pay them, because the rest of it is lacking. But if I pay you enough, I think you're going to stay. The reality is we don't stay because we get paid a lot of money. We stay because we believe in the vision, or we believe in what we're doing, or we feel like it's a place we can work.
And we've been appreciated and
Right.
we feel valued.
But it's not always wrong to use bribery and incentives. It's not bad to say, hey, if you reach this level, I'm going to give you this bonus, or son, if you do your homework, I'll take you to Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
It works, even in our churches. If you bring your Bible and memorize some scriptures, we're going to give you some money that we call kids cash, and you can go to the kids store and buy some things. It works, and it creates habits, but it's just not the highest level of influence. He said the next level of influence, which is a higher level of influence, is trust. He said trust cannot happen because you buy it or you demand it. Trust happens over time.
Right.
And trust can only happen when you create a series of events for a long period of time that prove that you are trustworthy. And most guys struggle with this one. I deal with guys all the time, and we'll be in a meeting, and we might have had 6 months where we've kind of worked together, and they feel like they've done well for 6 months, but they don't realize for 20 years they've treated their wife a certain way, or they've treated their employees a certain way, or they've treated whoever they're dealing with a certain way. But these 6 months they've been good, if you will. And they're mad because everyone in their past doesn't believe them yet.
It's like cream cheese icing on a mud cake.
Yeah. I used to tell kids in schools, and teachers for that matter, if you never make your bed, ever, and one day you make your bed, and you come out of your room and you go, I'm a bed maker, we all laugh at you and say you're a liar. You never make your bed. Just because you made it one day doesn't make you a bed maker. But if you make your bed every day for 6 years straight, and you come out of your room and you say, I'm a bed maker, now
There's evidence.
there's evidence because we trust you. But he said the highest level of influence, the highest level, is vision. And vision is when you've done in your life what you want other people to do, and they've seen it in your life, and now they can emulate it. When my daughter was in 5th grade, she wanted to date a boy. At my house, I wasn't too keen on her dating boys.
In 5th grade especially, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a public school. It's not like I can stop her. I mean, can't go to the classroom and say, you will not date, and you keep...
Stop talking to her.
Yeah, I mean, all I could do was give her a vision. And I remember telling her, if you date this boy, and you decide to date this boy, are you going to get married to him? Well, no. Well, how long is it going to last? A month? 2 months? Let's say it lasts 2 months. That's a long dating process for a 5th grader. Well, then you break up and you're mad at him and he's mad at you, and then he's going to date somebody else, and you might date somebody else, and all of a sudden now those people don't like each other, and pretty soon they date other people, and there's all these factions and drama in your class. I said, what if you don't date anyone? Just see what happens. And sure enough, she didn't date the guy, which she chose that, but he dated all her friends. But all her friends, she became Switzerland. She became the neutral party. That they all became friends with her because she never dated him.
And all the rest of them were like an episode of Friends.
And what happened was she became the most popular kid in school because she didn't date, which is really what she wanted. She wanted to have influence. And at the end of the year, she realized, I don't want to date because all it's going to do is bring drama. But she saw it. Now she has a vision. Before we talked, she had no vision. But once she saw it for herself, I don't have to train her anymore.
Right.
The highest level of influence is when you don't have to train the person you want them to do what you want them to do because they've seen it in your life or they've seen it in their own life and it's worked for them. And I think it's interesting what you're saying because what you did was you broke down the trust in you and your wife's marriage. When you started making the changes, it's taken you probably this long, if not longer, to there's probably still areas in that she's going, is Loren for real? Is he really gonna do this? Is this just a phase? And that in my life,
it's only been 15 years.
Yeah. And my life the same way. Like literally, Debbie and I, we went through a lot of issues at the very beginning because of my own selfishness, including pornography. And when we started going to marriage coaching, I wanted it to be fixed right away. And it's now been 14 years, 15 years. But I'll tell you what's helped her the most was when I am selfless and she can see it. And now it's become something that she embraces versus something that's difficult for her. But I think it's interesting you said that because when we can build trust, we will truly have the power that you're talking about, which I don't think power is wrong. It's just wrong if it's used wrong. Because going back to that scripture I said at the very beginning, Paul told Timothy, God didn't give you a spirit of fear, but he gave you power.
Yeah.
He gave you power. He gave you love. We talked about love as being really what your masculinity is all about. And he gave you a sound mind. Sound mind, all it means is sanity. He gave you sanity. When you lack fear, which you said a while ago, when you don't feel like you have control of the politics, you don't feel like you have control, really what that turns out to be is fear. Because now I'm afraid that they're going to do something to me or hurt me or whatever. When you fear, you lack power, you lack your ability to love, and you lack your ability to make good decisions. And think about how many insane decisions we made as men because we're afraid our wives are going to control us or not get what we want. Yeah. We've made insane decisions. God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. Really, power, love, and a sound mind is your masculinity.
Which tells you that fear comes obviously from another source. Mm-hmm. And that it is a detrimental and destructive thing. You know, one of the other aspects of leadership, and this was a vision. I don't remember if I heard someone talking around this idea, but I had a vision of water in a cup. And I thought, it's really funny that the water in that cup is shaped exactly like the cup. And if you change the shape of the cup,
the water changes.
The water changes shape. And so, which one's the influencer? The cup or the water? But then you realize that if you took that same water and you poured it over a rock, the water would run around the rock. Mm-hmm. It would take on the shape of the rock. So whether it's in the cup or on the rock, it's going to take the shape of whatever it is, unless you leave it there long enough. And water running on that rock long enough will eventually change the shape of the rock. So you can be the water and feel like you're contained and feel like you're held back. And I think that's the challenge for a lot of young men, especially. I know it was for me. I struggled. I fought against authority. When I got into the Air Force, my ability to communicate, my ability to read people, my ability to take charge of a moment, that my natural reaction that if you put me in a crisis moment, I'll wait long enough to see if anybody else is going to, and if no one else takes charge, I will. I've been that way since I was 12, 13 years old. The first person I coached out of suicide had a loaded .357 in her hand. I watched her put the bullets in. I was 14, she was 17. And I walked out the door with the gun and all the bullets not in it. I don't know how I did that. That was just a natural gift in me. But when I got into the Air Force, they recognized that early on, put a rope on my shoulder, made me a leader right away, et cetera, et cetera. And I got into it with a guy one day who gave me a bunch of orders and they didn't make any sense. He's like, I want you guys to march, and I'm like, why? I mean, there's no logic to that whatsoever. He said, you don't get to decide if there's logic. Your job is to get the people to do what I told you to do. I tell you to do it, you make them do it, that's leadership. And I went, no, it's not. I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have my rope long. I took it off and handed it back to him. And I said, if that's what leadership is, I'm not interested. And so whatever opportunity I had to lead, I didn't want it. But his vision of leadership was being the cup.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow I knew intuitively leadership is more like the water.
Mm-hmm.
This is the shape I have to be in now because it's the environment that I'm in. But when you move me to another environment, I can have more impact. Recently, I had another vision that went along with that, and I thought, if I take an ice cube and I hold it over the cup, the water doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
If I put the ice cube in the cup, eventually the ice cube becomes the water, but the water transforms as a result of the impact of the ice cube.
Mm-hmm.
So the ice cube, like the water, has its own form, brings its own nature, but eventually becomes part of the environment. And I think what you're talking about, men becoming,
mm-hmm.
whether you're talking about in a marriage or in a company or on a team,
Mm-hmm.
is becoming that love source that says, I'm going to bring good, practical logic,
Mm-hmm.
a sound mind to this environment. I'm going to bring selflessness and genuine love to this environment. And that's going to give me the power, like an ice cube, to influence this environment.
Mm-hmm.
Am I missing it?
No, it's good. My team consists of about 9 guys. We have 9 men's pastors, different campuses, and then coordinators and other things that created the 9 guys. And I never led the meetings, but I was the leader. I had another guy lead the meetings. I usually started the meeting by giving a devotion of some sort and talking to them, but I literally put myself in a roundtable capacity where I was just one of the 9 instead of the guy barking out what we're going to do. But nobody ever mistook me for the leader. People knew I was the leader. And it's not because I said I was the leader. If you have to say you're the leader,
You're probably not.
you're probably not the leader. You have to be the leader. And being the leader is the one that's willing to lay down his life. It's willing to be selfless. When you're willing to do that, when you don't care about your voice being heard, when you don't care about being the loudest, when you don't care about being the one that's looks like he's in charge, you can be in charge without screaming and yelling. And leadership has to be more than force and control. If it's not, we're fooling ourselves. In our homes, you think about how many men struggle in homes, and the only leadership level they understand is force and control. And their kids hate them. Their wife hates them. They may stay married for 25, 30, 50 years maybe, but nobody likes them. Nobody respects them. Nobody wants to follow them. If my kids didn't follow me, I would be devastated. And I know a lot of Christian men that their kids won't follow them. And their wife won't follow them. And it's not because they're not good looking. It's not because they don't have a good job. It's not because they don't drive the right cars. It's because they don't know how to love. And they're stuck in a rut that they think they have to live in, or they're going to lose control. And when you feel like you're going to lose control, so you have to be in control, you're never going to be the leader you really want to be.
And you see those parents, and walking through Walmart or whatever grocery store or convenience store, that the kid reaches for a toy on the shelf, and instead of saying we're not buying toys today and moving on, it's grabbing them by the hair, grabbing them by the shirt, and yanking them around, and forcing them to walk a certain way in a certain path in a certain direction. And I think early on, because that was the leadership role, and that was the parenting style that I lived as a child, that was the way that I parented early on. And it wasn't until this transformation took place in my life about 15 years ago, which sadly was too late in the lives of some of my kids to really have the impact. But I think probably as you said, if you're 6 years into making your bed, you can call yourself a bed maker. Mm-hmm. It was Christmas of 2016, the first Christmas I had with my dad in 44 years. Mm-hmm. And he showed up at the house, and we had presents and dinner, and everybody was just chatting. And my grown kids had all decided to play Cards Against Humanity, and their objective was trying to get mom to say bad things. And I'm like, good luck with that. Mom doesn't say much at all, but so that was their game, was trying to get mom to say bad things. So my dad and I are just sitting on bar stools at the end of the table. We're not engaged in the game. We're just watching. And so we watched this for several hours, and probably close to 2 hours. About midnight, he's like, okay, I gotta go. So I walk him out to the car, and we get to the car, and he looks at me and he said, can I ask you a question? I said, what's that? He said, I'm absolutely amazed. He said, every one of those kids, they listen to your every word. They do what you ask them to do. The grandkids would rather be in your lap than anybody else in the house. Even the dog, the one that's not yours, runs to you first. How is that the case? And he said, I don't know how you learned how to be a dad, because I know I wasn't around to do it, and my dad didn't know who his was, so I never learned how to father. I don't know where you learned it, but I'm proud of you, and I want to spend more time around your family.
That's cool.
That was you're a bed maker. I see it from here, you're a bed maker, kind of a statement for me, and that was enormous, knowing how bad I'd screwed up before. But I think there are a lot of young men today who are asking the question, aside from being a baby daddy, what does it mean to be a father? Aside from being the violent control, I can make the money, I can make you do what I want you to. This is kind of an aside, but it's very relevant. If you watch too many videos on YouTube, you'll see a series of gold digger, where they actually go out and bait a young woman with a fancy car or a fancy house or a studly looking guy, just to see if they can get her to succumb to the temptation to be attracted to this physical specimen or the material aspect. And I think to myself, what have we done to women to create a place where what attracts them, what they think they're looking for? Because this is no different than a mousetrap laden with rice, with rat poison and peanut butter. I mean, the rat poison is going to kill them, but the peanut butter has been attractive long enough that they will fall for it anyway. And I think in what we would consider to be femininity as opposed to masculinity, we have this very tainted, distorted, corrupted view of what a woman wants.
Well, think about this. Jesus always brought it back to the heart. And a woman's deepest desire is security. So if my dad wasn't a healthy man, wasn't a healthy masculine man, he didn't know how to love me, he didn't know how to bring security, what I'm looking for is someone that can. And so the only image I have of security is what I see in the world, which is the big house, which is the big bank account, which is the nice car. So the bait would work for a lot of women, not because they're attracted to that, but because they're attracted to security. Because
those are the symbols that say.
Those are the symbols that say. But it won't last. So you might get them with those things, but you're never going to keep them. Because if your heart isn't to love them, if your heart isn't to be selfless, eventually it's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
You have to understand that even as a man, as a young father, it really has nothing to do with whether the people around you are good enough to follow you. It's, are you good enough for them to follow? Because as J. Oswald Sanders says, John Maxwell says, probably every leader in the world's ever said this, leadership is influence. Influence isn't something that I take from somebody and make them do, or they take from me. Influence is because they see something in my life that in their heart they want to follow, not just because I'm making them. They literally want to follow. If I can get someone to literally want to follow me from their heart, I'm their leader. I just influence them. So if I'm thinking about a young father or young dad, the first thing I ask them, and I tell them to practice, is practice working on your own heart. When you're willing to open up your heart and be vulnerable, when you're willing to share your faults and share your issues, and you're willing to lay down the things in your life that you're struggling with, really what the Bible talks about, it comes to Christianity, it comes to what Jesus talked about, is giving your heart, walking in the light, laying those things down, it becomes attractive to those around you. When I share my faults, the Bible says, God will make me strong. When I'm weak, he'll make me strong. And leadership is really weakness. I mean, it sounds crazy, but if I'm willing to not care about the title, the position, the money, if I'm willing to just care about my heart and go after my heart and ask God to help change my heart, when my heart changes, I become attracted to those around me. I was talking to a guy yesterday, divorced, trying to get his wife back, been 10, 12 years. She's been with a few guys in the process. They're older, in their 60s. And he's made some changes. really some positive changes in his life. And so he's trying to convince me that his ex-wife won't come back to him because she doesn't want to have a relationship. And I asked the question, why doesn't she want to have a relationship? And he said, because she's scared. I said, okay, why is she scared? He goes, well, because in the past I did all these negative things. And I go, okay, so why is she scared now? And he goes, because she thinks I'm going to do it again. I said, okay, she thinks you're going to do it again. So you just spent 10, 15 minutes telling me that your kids tell me that you've changed. You say that you've changed. But your wife, your ex-wife, doesn't think you've changed. So who cares what your kids think? And who cares what you think? Until she knows you've changed, she's not going to feel safe. The question isn't, when do you change and everyone should know it? The question is, when you change, everyone will know it. But until then, you got to keep changing. Keep working on you. Keep going after the things in your heart that you can fix. Keep loving, keep being vulnerable. He's a big guy, strong guy, good-looking guy, and I said, your muscles, your looks, your car is not attractive to your ex-wife. It's your heart. If you'll give your heart to her, and you'll quit caring whether she'll give her heart to you, you'll get her heart. But until then, you're just going to be frustrated, and you're going to be hurt, and you're going to think she doesn't care. And the reality is you spent all these years screwing this thing up, and now you've had a year where you've done well. We've got some time it's going to take, but you've got to be willing to lay down your life. And that's hard. And if men would do that, if men would really be vulnerable, their wives would follow them.
It's like when your personal trainer says, I can't make you skinny in a week, it took you 20 years to get fat.
That's right. That's right. You got to do the work. And the work is your heart. And Jesus said that. He said, I don't care so much about what you're doing. If I can get your heart to change, all the sins in your life will change. He said, sexual immorality, he said, it's what comes out of your heart. Not what you eat, it's what comes out of your heart that causes you to do all these negative things. So if I can get your heart to change, I can get you to change. You can do all the right things and your heart be bad, and the persona you bring in, the environment that you create in your home is negative, even though you're doing all the right things.
Now, how many times have we seen the news reporter show up in front of the house, and there's the cop car, and the news story says, murder, suicide, and you're looking at this $1 million home with all the nice accoutrements, and everything on the outside looks like they're doing the right stuff, showing up for work, being disciplined, getting the right education, performing the right job. And probably everybody in their life would look at them and go, they have an ideal marriage. I mean, they've got, their kids are in private school, or their kids are, accomplishing these things, they're going off to college. They've got it all together. But I remember when Brad Stahl was one of my mentors, I asked several times, we were having a conversation, where am I, how am I doing? And he'd give me feedback for what he'd seen, and give me the challenging questions and stuff. And one day I was walking through the lobby, and we saw each other, and we started chatting a little bit. And then he turns to me, and my wife was right beside me, and he goes, "So, how are you doing with such and such?" And he goes, "Don't answer me. How's he doing with such and such?" And she was just floored. She's like, "Why are you asking me?" He said, "Because you know better than he does, and he'll tell me the truth." And she gave him an answer, and I don't remember what exactly the issue was, but it floored me that the mentor asking the recipient of the reward of the change in me was so profoundly different. Like you said, it's great that your kids think that, that's awesome. It's great that you think that, that's awesome. But until the person who you need to win over believes you,
Doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. And it's not the accoutrements, and it's not all the stuff of this life. It's not the cares of this world. It's the who that you're becoming. So let me ask this question, because I want to take this to very practical standards. And ironically, we're back to that balance wheel. It all seems like it authority to respect, to influence, to impact, to transformation. And the transformation leads to a new story, which creates even more authority and more respect. Knowing that a large portion of my audience are young men, 18 to 24, a large portion of them are in the same situation I was. They're raised without dad in the family. They don't have the influence of a good male role model. They're looking from an education standpoint, from a spiritual leadership standpoint, I'm looking at the world, and they tell me I gotta have, look at the two biggest influencers on YouTube, and they're both absolute morons as far as their behavior and their character is concerned. Their language is horrible. The demonstration of who they are as a person, If they really are who they pretend to be on YouTube, not anybody I'd want my kids hanging out with. But they're the biggest influencers in social media. So if that's the influence these young men 18 to 24 around the world are getting, what advice do you give them?
Well, if you want to go practically, who you are, again, back to the very beginning, who you are is what really matters, not what you do. So what I didn't say at the very beginning, we started off with when I was studying men and studying about what makes men tick and what is masculinity and what is emasculation.
For that sake, take a moment and just give us your learned definitions of those two words.
So I met a guy named Billy Grammer. Billy Graham is a sex therapist. He came in to teach, and I asked him to teach on purity, and he decided to teach on masculinity. And it's really where I learned the true definitions of what masculinity really is and what it looks like, and what you should be doing practically to get there by age, which was very unique. And he talked about a boy and a girl being born, and if they're born, so here they are, we want to try to get them to healthy femininity or healthy masculinity. At what age should they be doing what? So he said from birth to 5 for a boy, and he used two words that really impacts this talk. One was direct, one was indirect. And I'll explain those in a second, but he said for a boy, from birth to 5, he has a direct relationship with mama. Direct really means it's about who you are. Indirect is about what you do. So what you do is your indirect. Who you are is your direct. Birth to 5, he has a direct relationship with mom. She's meeting all of his needs and helping him become who he is. But around 5 or 6, he starts separating from mom, and he starts creating what he would call indirect relationships. Now, these are relationships based on what he does. So if he plays sports, his friends come from sports. Schools, his friends come from school. Whatever he does, his relationships are based on that. And it's during these years between 6 and 13 that he needs to get a healthy dose of indirect. Indirect's actually really good during these years. Because it's during those years that you figure out what you do matters. What you don't do matters. It's during these years that if you go the wrong way in sports, if you go left when you're supposed to go right, you're going to lose pretty quickly, and you're going to feel the loss, and that loss feeling is actually a good thing.
Not to mention the peer pressure.
Not to mention the peer pressure, because all your friends are indirect as well, and they're going to not want to be your friend if you don't play the game the way it should. Everything's black and white with boys from 6 to 13. It's black and white. And for boys, they need to get a healthy dose of indirect, and it's during that time they also learn that morals, right versus wrong. They learn that there's right things to do and there's wrong things to do. What's interesting in our society today is we want to give everyone a participation trophy, and we say winning doesn't matter. We want to say there's no more grades because we don't want to grade anyone, because if we grade someone, it's going to make their self-esteem low. And there's this whole talk about self-esteem, and really what we're doing when we talk about that is we're emasculating our boys, and what emasculation really is not understanding that what you do does matter. So they're getting these participation trophies and they have failed. They're getting these no grades and they have failed, and they're told they're good when they're not. And because of that, when they get into the real world, they're not prepared to be the men, the strong men that God called them to be. So these years are real important. Winning and losing, video games aren't bad. People think video games are bad. It's not bad. It's just bad if you're feeding them a lot of junk inside those video games. But winning and losing is good.
Playing the game is not the problem.
Exactly.
It's the game you're playing.
At 13, something changes. You hit puberty, somewhere in that age group, 13, 14, 12. You hit puberty, and things shift. So you were direct with mama, indirect here, and for a boy from 13 to death, it's about going back to being direct again. So I'm going to explain it again. Indirect's what you do, direct's who you are. A healthy masculine man knows who he is, not just what he does. What he does doesn't matter as much now as who he is. Now what he does is powerful, but who he is more powerful. So
But most people identify their who I am by what they do.
Exactly.
That's why their business card has job title or position or accomplishments or degrees,
Exactly.
as opposed to just me.
Right. So which is why we're mixed up with masculinity, because we think true masculinity, which is really combining your indirect with your direct. It would be bad if somebody wasn't good physically at something, but they were good morally at something. We'd call them nice guys, but they're failures, right?
Right.
Or if they were immoral at a bunch of stuff, but they were really good at something,
We call them president.
yeah, nobody would like them, but yet they're, whatever, they're good. Both of those are wrong. What we want is someone who's good at what they do and is a good person. And that's what God's called them to do. That's true masculinity. For a girl, it's different. From a girl from birth to 13, it's all about direct. It's all about who we are. Now, it doesn't mean girls don't like sports, they don't like to compete, or they don't like indirect things. But usually when a girl does those things, they do it in community. It's about community. It's about doing it together.
Girls, people.
Girls go to the bathroom together. Boys don't do that, right? Girls love to talk about things that are going on in other people's lives. They love hearing about other people's connection. They feel connected when they think they know something about somebody. Boys don't care about that.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have a gossip magazine publishing industry.
That's right. So birth to 13, for girls, it's all about being direct. But from 13 to death, for girls, it's all about being indirect. Now, for girls, it's not about who they are anymore. It's about what they do.
Am I a mom? Am I a wife? Am I accomplished in my career?
Am I doing good? So power for girls is something they have to learn. Boys learn it at a young age if they're healthy. Then they got to learn about who they are. Love. That's why love is
Identity.
That's why Paul said, when I was a child, I put away childish things. When I became a man, I took on the manly things. Manly things is love. For women, they've learned that. Now they got to learn about doing something. So what's cool is God gave men and women together. He called you to be married. That's why I didn't want it to be two men or two women, because we couldn't teach each other. I can teach my wife how to be indirect. She can teach me how to be direct. Now let me just say this. It's not that you give up your indirect. You add to it direct.
Right.
And it's not that you give up your direct for women. You add to it indirect. So we don't want women not to be community-based and family-based and loving and caring. We want to keep them there, but we want to add to them the ability to get something done and be successful. We don't want men not to know how to do things and be strong, but we want to add to them their heart and the things in their life. So masculinity is when you understand, for a man, it's when you understand who you are, not just what you do. And who you are is really based on what God designed you to be.
So where does toxic masculinity fit into that?
Well, it all depends on how you define toxic masculinity. So I would go back to toxic masculinity being an immature way of looking at masculinity. So it's about what you do.
And it's that level 1 leadership.
That's level 1. It's about control. It's about I'm strong, I'm better, I'm faster, I'm quicker, I win at all costs. That's a toxic masculinity. It's an unhealthy masculinity. It's not the way God designed it. But as a 6-year-old, we want them to have that. We want them to feel bad when they lose. We want them to feel bad when they get a D.
Right.
We want them to feel bad when they're not doing well at their job. There's consequences to that. Because why? Because you change. You'll make adjustments. When you're losing, you make adjustments. And we talked about that?
Yep.
So when boys are losing, they make adjustments. So here's what's amazing about this. When you get older, sin starts to matter now. Whether you love God or you don't love God, whether you're sinning or not sinning, and the Bible talks about sin is just missing the mark. When you're not doing what God's called you to do, and you start to lose in relationships, and you start to lose in your job, you start to lose in other areas, you can now start making the adjustments with God to help develop that.
Right.
Which is why 6 to 13, it's important for them to be able to win and be able to lose. Not just everybody's a winner. When we say that to our boys, we're emasculating them. When we think, I should win no matter what I do in my marriage, you should like me no matter what I do in my marriage, you're emasculated. When I'm trying to get my wife to be okay with my selfishness, it's about me, it's about I'm going to have sex the way I want to have sex, I'm going to watch what I want to watch, I'm going to spin how I want to spin. When I want her to be okay with those things and be loving and caring and not care, because my mom didn't discipline me for those things. I want you to not care about those things. We're emasculated. But here's the ultimate emasculation, is sin. Sin emasculates you. Sin robs you, it makes you feel guilty, makes you feel shame. When you live a righteous life, it emasculates you. So the definition of masculinity is Jesus. He never sinned. He lived a perfect, righteous life. He always felt powerful, always felt strong, always felt in control. This is interesting. So he's about to die, and Pontius Pilate says, I have the control to kill you. And Jesus looks at him and says, you have no control. Only my Father has that kind of control. He knew exactly who he was And he always was in control, and he never felt fear. He walked in complete strength. He was a true man. And that's what God wants for all men. He wants you to know that you're in control even when it doesn't look like you're in control. That's why when I ran the ministry at Gateway, I made sure that I wasn't the one in the front, and I was still leading. I didn't have to be the guy barking the orders. I can be the guy with everybody, but I knew that I was the one who knew who God called him to be. My title didn't matter. The amount of money I made didn't matter. What mattered was I was living for God. I was going after him with everything I got, and that's an influence. So if I'm going to be a new dad, if I'm going to be a new husband, what I tell those guys is work on you. Get your mind off her. Get your mind trying to fix your family. Fix you. If you do that, you will be an influence. What does an influence mean? They will follow. That's all it means. And all that influence means is people are following you. So if you're truly working on you, you will truly be an influence, which means they will start changing and you won't have to make them change. This is powerful.
Well, and that's not just, you use the word attractive, it's magnetic.
It's magnetic.
I mean, it draws in the same way that two opposite poles repel. It draws not just women, but other people to you. If you want to see your vision grow, whatever God's given you as an assignment, allow that vision to be selfless and not selfish, and it will attract people to it. People will come around to be a part of what you're doing. You know, the old marketing phrase is set yourself on fire and the world will gather around and watch. You know, the challenge with that is most people bring marshmallows.
Right.
They're not interested in put the fire out. They just want to watch you self-destruct.
Yeah.
And for people who are pursuing the material wealth, for people who are looking for their power to come from physical strength or physical prowess or accomplishments, people will gather around and watch you self-destruct. I mean, they love morbid curiosity, loves that concept. On the other hand, if you learn to be the kind of person, and I've told my kids, my baby's 21 now, I've told both my boys and both my daughters, as you're growing up, just work on being the kind of person someone else wants to marry.
Yeah.
And you will not have to pursue a spouse.
That's right.
They will hunt you down.
That's right.
Because there are so few.
That's right.
So my boys have always been taught since they were 4 or 5 years old, I don't care if it's mom, grandmom, or an absolute stranger. If you see a woman go into a door, you get there first.
That's right.
You get there first and you open it.
Yeah.
You treat her with the respect that she deserves. That my boys, when they were younger, they had a problem with telling mom no for about a week. It lasted about a week. I think I took a play out of Josh McDowell's playbook. He was telling a story one time on an interview with James Dobson. And Josh said, I came home from a trip. I'd been speaking at men's conferences. I think it was Promise Keepers. He said, I walked in the door and I was in the laundry room between the kitchen and the garage, and nobody knew I was home yet. I was just unpacking my dirty clothes, because that's what a good man does. He said, as I was doing that, I heard an argument, and so I stopped what I was doing and I listened. And basically my son was ready to go play basketball. He was 17, 18 years old. He's 6 foot plus. Wife's a little bitty woman. And he said, she told him to go back and clean your room before you go play basketball. He grabbed the phone again and said, no, I'm going to call my friends. I'm going to go play basketball, clean my room later. She said, no, you won't. You'll go clean your room, because that's what I told you to do. And he yelled the B word at her, threw the phone at her, and started to storm off. And Josh said, I came through the door, I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, I pinned him to the wall, said, you have one option, apologize. Otherwise, we're going to step outside. Because she was my wife long before she was your mother. And no one talks to my wife like that. For me, that was a settling moment, because I'd never heard someone say, this is an isolated relationship between husband and wife. I love you, you're my kids, but that's my wife. And I will treasure her till death do us part. And that's sincere, that's serious.
Yeah.
My parents were divorced, my wife had been through a divorce, her parents had been divorced, and so divorce was a acceptable means of an end until we got married, and we said that whatever happens, we'll fight through it, we'll find a way to make it. And it was her tenacity, not mine, because I told her to leave, and she wouldn't go. Young men today don't see that in their parents. They don't see it in their fathers. They don't see that tenacity to stay. They don't see being the person that attracts a spouse. They see, how will I dominate? How will I control? How will I be that level 1 leader? How will I take on the world's form of masculinity? And I believe you're on a good path, bringing the book and And now I understand your new role in Atlanta is not necessarily men's ministry per se.
No, it's over all ministries.
Okay.
So I'll be helping all the ministries try to figure this out. But the reality is it's the same principles. We have to serve. We have to be humble. When you were talking about being attractive, I remember asking, I was a youth pastor for a long time, and if you ask girls, teenagers, 20-year-olds, what's attractive to you? Most of them will say a guy who worships. And if you think about a guy who worships, a guy who will cry out to God, he's a humble man. And humility is a sign of masculinity. It's when I'm willing to lay down and be weak and allow God to make me strong, that I become the true masculine man that God has called me to be. That's attractive.
Not proud, not rude, not self-seeking.
That's right. So it goes back to 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. If you can just look at those and go, God, help me to work on those areas of my life. Where am I impatient? Where am I not kind? Where am I keeping records of wrongs? I had all those. I had all those in my marriage. I had all those with people around me. And I can tell you I drive differently now. I talk differently. I act differently through this process. And the catalyst of all this was I was willing to let my wife speak into my life and share with me some un-Christ-like things that I needed to hear.
So if we asked Debbie today, then you're a totally different person.
I'm different there. Do I still have things to work on? Absolutely. My scoreboard's not 100%. I wish it was. I would be Jesus. But I know where I'm making mistakes, and knowing is half the battle. A lot of times we think we're doing well and we're not. And that's frustrating. Because when you think you're doing well and everyone around you doesn't like you, then you're just confused. But if you can look at this and go, oh, I wasn't patient, I wasn't kind, I was rude to that guy, I wasn't, whatever. If you can go through those things and see them, then you can repent. And you can get mercy and God's pardon, and He'll change you. Isaiah 55 is one of my life verses, and it literally says, if you'll turn to God while He's near, and turn from your wicked ways and your wicked thoughts. If you'll do those two things, which means I have wicked ways, my heart's wicked. If I'll give Him my wicked heart and my wicked thoughts, the Bible says He'll pardon you and forgive you, because His thoughts are not your thoughts, His ways are not your ways. And then it says something really interesting to me. It talks about a physical change that God will do in your life. It says He will send out His word that will not return void, just like the rain and snow come back and water the earth and make it bud and flourish. So His word will go out, not return void. And then it says this. It says, I'll turn you from a thorn bush to a cypress tree. I'll turn you from briars to myrtle. Literally what He's saying is, you were thorny relationally. People didn't want to get close to you. People didn't like you. Because you're a wicked heart and your wicked thoughts.
Yeah.
Your thoughts and your ways are wicked. But when you received His word, it literally changed you from thorny to now someone that they can embrace and think is beautiful, attractive. From briar, which is just a bunch of thorns mixed together in a big bush, to now a cypress, to a myrtle, which is a beautiful plant. Like, God wants to make you beautiful. He wants to make you great. But the way to do that is you repent. And every time you repent and receive His word, He accelerates your growth. And if you can learn how to repent, if you can learn how to look at your life through what the Bible says is right and wrong, not what you think.
Stop thinking about it like that.
Yeah, and repent. Say, God, I had an evil thought of lust. I give that to you. Will you fill me with purity? God, I was angry. I judged that person. Will you fill me with forgiveness? Lord, I'm really mad with my wife for whatever reason. Will you help me to honor her and love her? When you make that exchange, the Bible says He will accelerate your growth and change you to look differently to the people around you. I've lived by that, and that's what I know. So, am I perfect? No. Does my wife and I ever have disagreements? Absolutely. Are there times where I wish I didn't judge her because I'm seeing things that she's doing that reminds me of things that we did 20 years ago? Absolutely. But I'm recognizing those now, and I'm giving them to God, and I'm asking Him to replace that, which is really Colossians 3. If you want to put to death your flesh, you got to get rid of this and clothe yourself with righteousness.
Right.
So it's a two-part process. You got to ask God to forgive you, but you have to receive His word. If you're not receiving His word, you're only doing one part of it. Jesus calls that a guy who lets go of a demon. The demon goes away. He cleans up that area of his life. He's forgiven, but he comes back with 7 other demons because he sees this clean, and you're worse than you were before because you didn't put the word of God in you. It's not just okay to repent, but you also have to clothe yourself.
Well, it's that same guy who looks in a mirror and then walks away and forgets what he looks like. He may have heard the word, but he didn't do anything about it.
That's right.
He didn't fill with it.
That's right.
And I believe that's where that power comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So your book is due out when? Do you have a date yet?
Don't have a date yet. The publisher, I just finished it, so now we've got to go through the editing process, and once that's done, then we'll be able to publish it. And hopefully within the next 6 months we'll have it done.
And you're publishing through Christian Men's Network.
Christian Men's Network.
Our mutual friend, Dr. Paul Cole.
Oh, cool.
So, and we've had interviews with Paul as well. It was a brilliant conversation.
Yeah.
So the book, I'm guessing since the men's conference in Dallas usually happens in late October, it should be ready by then, perhaps?
It should be ready by October. Actually, the conference is in May this year.
In Dallas?
His conference.
Yeah,
You're talking
Christian
Christian
Men's
Men's Conference. Yeah, it's in October. You're right. It's in Dallas. His conference. Our Gateway's conference is in May. Sorry about that. Yeah. So, yeah, I would love to have it done by both of those.
That would be great.
Yeah. It all depends on the editing. You know how that goes.
Expedited process as the will of God content.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to say?
No, I just hope what people are encouraged through the process of this conversation is God's first. Put God first. If you're seeking God first, He'll take care of every desire you have. He'll take care of you, and you can trust Him. And I think for many men, we're putting ourselves first, and we're struggling with that. So I'm hoping that that's what they get out of this.
And I think many men are struggling because they haven't learned to trust God to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
And thanks again for watching the Leading Leaders podcast, being part of our 2020 Servant Leader series. I hope you've enjoyed this time with Pastor Todd McIntyre. And I know you're moving on to some new things in Atlanta, but we're anxious to see how those go. How can people get in touch with you?
I'll be at Victory Church in Atlanta, in Norcross, Georgia. And they can find me on Facebook or Instagram or however they want to find me.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Todd, I appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Thanks for
thank
being
you.
here. Thanks again for watching. Be sure you share this with anybody that you feel like it would benefit. And if you're a young man, 18 to 24, and you're asking that question, what does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be a real man? How do I become a real man when I don't have a role model? Your best role model is going to be Christ. And if you want a really simple checklist, go to 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, pull out all of those words, and then just ask yourself yes or no. Am I patient, kind, rude, self-seeking? If you can answer yes or no to those questions, you've got a really good scoreboard to work with, thanks to Real Masculinity. What is the name of the book?
Don't know yet. We're still coming up with the title.
All right.
So
just look at your Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Christian Men's Network for the name Todd McIntyre. You're going to find the book when it's available and learn what it really means to be a masculine man. Thanks a lot for watching Leading Leaders Podcast. I'm J Loren Norris. Have a blessed day.